Hi, everyone. My name is Scott Loftin, and I'm the Director of Customer Success here at Codility. We have a fantastic webinar with some really great subject matter experts within the tech recruiting community to discuss remote candidate relationship building. Now, before we begin, I wanted to go over a few housekeeping items. After a short presentation, we'll shift into a fireside chat mode. And in order to kind of keep the conversation more free-flowing, we highly encourage participation of the audience in asking our guests questions. We found that keeping that really engages the audience and also helps keep that conversation, again, really free-flowing. So now I'd like to kind of talk through some of our agenda items today. Go to the next slide, please. Great. So we'll do a quick speaker introduction. We'll go to recruitment insights, and that's going to be hosted by Natan today. And then we'll go right into the fireside chat. And then again, throughout the conversation, we'll go through Q&A and also wrap up with that as well. Fantastic. So now I'd love to take the opportunity to introduce both of our speakers, and actually would love for them to actually introduce themselves. Natan, we'll go ahead and start with you.
Yeah, I'm Natan Fisher, co-founder, co-CEO of SingleSprout. We are a data-driven tech recruiting firm. We focus on hiring engineers, product managers, data scientists, product designers, anyone that fits under the product or engineering or tech umbrella. We focus on hiring these folks at the individual level all the way up to manager, director, New York, LA, San Francisco, San Diego, Toronto, Boston, DC, and of course, remote now.
Absolutely. Remote first everything. And Chris, I'd love to turn it over to you as well.
Hey everybody, I'm Chris Tava. I'm the CTO at InRhythm. We are a high-end consultancy that focuses on the financial services industry as well as other verticals. We place our technology experts at our best customer sites to make a huge impact. We consider ourselves bar raisers. This is why technical recruiting and finding really quality candidates are super important to me.
Fantastic. Really excited to have both of you here and excited to drive that conversation. I think at this point now, I will go ahead and turn over the presentation to Natan and have him share some of his slides.
Cool. Thanks, Scott. Very much appreciate that. So I put together a handful of slides on remote recruitment. I apologize. Remote recruitment, building relationships with the right candidate. And I'll just go through that. So a little bit just more on SingleSprout. I'm the co-CEO, co-founder of SingleSprout. We work with a number of organizations, ScriptEd, Charity Water, Give Directly. I'll bring that up in a little bit. For us, every candidate that we place, we make a donation. Currently, we're focusing on Give Directly in their COVID-19 fund. We've placed hundreds and hundreds of candidates all over the map: Peloton, Instacart, Oscar Health, Better Mortgage. And the way that we've done that is through a lot of training, long-lasting relationships, and our technology. So we have a pretty robust database that we're analyzing candidates on flight risk, location, industry, salary data. We have a fantastic engineering team that sits out of Los Angeles. They're focused on matching all of these different data points. Our emailing system, so we're able to email candidates from any email handle, including SingleSprout or the companies that we work with, 250 to 500 emails a week. And we're integrated with a number of ATSs like Lever and Greenhouse to make sure that we can, really have an efficient process with our clients. Just really quickly jumping into some sourcing recommendations, as we all have maybe a little bit more time and want to focus on the right candidates. If you want to jump into that, I think right now more than ever, short messages to candidates that are in your network, so first or second degree, bring up COVID-19? How are you doing? I don't, I'm feeling like it's pretty cliche to keep on going, hope you're safe, hope you're okay. That's okay too, but I like asking people, how are you doing? I use a calendar link like Calendly, and personalize your outreach on why it's valuable for that person to chat with you. Social media, I just read a report that LinkedIn is absolutely surging right now. I would, continue that habit and try to post and get senior members of your organization to post and kind of create that flywheel of marketing, sales, and service in the recruiting process. So some things that candidates might be looking for on your social media posts right now is, why is the opportunity exciting? What's the impact in the new landscape, the new world that we're in right now? How are you building it? What tools are you using? Why are you building it that way? Where is this going? And what's the end goal? Always include an email in the post. And then, check in on social media as well with people with direct messages. So outside of sourcing, reaching out to people, ask how they're doing. I would be vulnerable with people. We're all in this, mound of anxiety and whatever else it is. And so what you're going through and where you are, I think people can relate to that more than ever before. And then, as I mentioned in the beginning of the slide, we work with a number of organizations. I think it's always important to show what organizations you're working with in the community, that shows that you're not just, pushing your corporate brand, but also trying to help in this time. Here's some interesting points that I think candidates are looking for now more than ever. And on your job descriptions, on your postings, when you talk in an initial conversation with a candidate and throughout the interview process, these are some points that candidates are looking for right now. The track record of the leadership, the track record of the investors, the team, statistics on women and underrepresented individuals in the organization has come up more and more. The growth of the brand, employees, user, revenue, where's the company growing? The technology, this has always been the case, but scaling data, what tools are being used, what interesting challenges are going on right now. And then last, but maybe the most important is flexibility. What are the benefits right now? According to a recent survey, tech workers valued flexibility in the workplace. And now that we're all working from home, that doesn't necessarily mean remote. That means, okay, what time should the day get started? Am I allowed to be offline for a few hours in the middle of the day? We recommend asking candidates, not just saying what the plan is, but asking, what does flexibility mean to them? What arrangement works best for them? The three main impact areas right now, and maybe also more than ever, is the speed of the process. That doesn't mean that you need to have a really short process, but an efficient process for sure. Getting the candidate to buy in, using a lot of those points that I just mentioned in the last slide, and then obviously, closing them and getting them to sign. So moving quick, a few recommendations I have there. Interview process and general timeline. I recommend posting that publicly and sharing, this is what the process is, this is how long the process generally takes, this is why, if you're feeling up for it, why it takes this long. The impact of why it's a great opportunity in this environment. That question is coming up more and more. COVID-19 has changed the world. What is your company doing that is providing a great opportunity for this candidate to make an impact in this environment? Remote activities and remote tools that are helping your organization win. Happy hours, events, what software is being used. I like to ask questions to the candidates early on. The team at SingleSprout does too. And so this helps us disqualify candidates faster or potentially even accelerate the candidate. So we're looking for salary expectations. What's their ideal role? What's their favorite part of their last role? That oftentimes gives them a lot of information. Our technology synthesizes this as well. What are their specific interests? What's their preferred management style right now? What are their absolute no's? If you don't disqualify the candidate, this should give you some good selling points for the conversation. Preparing for the first call. I think this is really important. I'm sure many of you are already familiar with this. I think more than ever before, it's important to be empathetic and understanding to begin with. It's possible people are a little late. They have other obligations. They have kids running around. That's going to happen more and more. Find a commonality in the background with the person that you are talking to. You know, have you come from a similar location, a similar company, activities that you have in common? Praise their background. Smile when you speak. Be prepared. This is also common. Be prepared to answer unconventional questions. You know, what's the office like? What's going on? What's the transition plan to get back into the office? And then I wrote on a last point, give outside of the process if you can. You know, if you know someone that can help them, that doesn't necessarily have to do with the job process. Maybe their significant other or someone that they know is also looking, and you find out that there's another role in your company, or you have a friend that has a role in mind for that person. Those little favors go a long way. Quick point on vulnerability. Again, reading an article recently that, you know, it's never been a better time to be more vulnerable with people. And I'll skip over this slide, but we'll provide this after. I think important to share your own surroundings, where you're at, why you're there, who you're with, what your day-to-day is like. They're going through very similar things, the candidate is. Listen intently, but guide the conversation. So when someone gives you an answer, very important right now to regurgitate their answer. Questions should be from an objective place. People might feel more judged right now if they're out of work. And so I like to sprinkle in words like sorry or I'm afraid. Paint a picture based on what they're looking for, based on the questions that were asked previously. Can you paint a good picture of what this candidate is looking for in terms of the culture, the tools that they're going to be using? And then, of course, set expectations on time of interview, or be polite if you want to exit the conversation. Again, I'm emphasizing smiling and being polite, but people remember these things, and now more than ever, again, there's a lot of anxiety, a lot of different feelings coming up for people. The last 10% of the conversation is how you are remembered. So that tone and approach, the transparency of what the next steps are, always very important. You might have had a fantastic conversation, but if you end on a bad note, that could go a long way compared to the next conversation the candidate's going to have. So really try to emphasize, you know, what the next steps are if you're interested, how to build rapport with them. Is it best to talk to them over a call, over a Zoom, over text message? I think these are some great tricks that will help you continue the momentum that you've had in the conversation. Some questions that we like to ask. I don't need to go through all of these, but what does flexibility mean to you? What does diversity mean to you? What is your timeline like right now? Are you actively looking for a job? What are your other opportunities? Technology assessment tools like Codility can be super helpful. Given that there are a lot more candidates in the market, you know, using a tool like Codility can really help accelerate and find the right candidates for you. I just recommend that if you do use an assessment tool, try to be as transparent as possible with the time spent on the technical assessment. That's really important to candidates. You might say, hey, we like to give people a take-home assignment, or we're going through the next step. I would recommend sharing how long that next step is. Again, if you can publicly post the amount of time and what the interview process looks like. But I really recommend it. The worst is when you say it's a small project and it takes the candidate 10 hours. That can erode trust. I think it's very helpful to take feedback on this part of the process, the technical portion. Are people actually doing the test? If they're not, what's the reason that they're not doing it? If you do these, you know, take-home assignments or a technical assessment of any kind, we recommend to do it in the second round. Keep it short. Junior candidates are probably going to be more likely to do them. I think the longer the test, the less likely people are to do them. But Codility can share more on that. And then last but not least, the pre-onsite to close. So for the onsite phase, we highly recommend calling candidates, a Zoom if possible, and trying to really align with them on salary, timeline, addressing any roadblocks, what concerns they have. we should be holding their hand, and as this is a tough time for many, and letting them know, as soon as we can, that an offer is on the horizon if that's what you decide to do. So just going back to these categories one last time, because they're so important, and I'm sure we'll cover these in the fireside chat. When you address these on this quote unquote on-site portion, make sure for the tech and product that ideally they can see under the hood, like the code and what they're working on, what projects are coming up, what does the day-to-day look like, what are the expectations of 30, 60, 90 days. On the people side, if possible, try to get them to meet as many people as possible on Zoom. Prep the team beforehand on the needs that you've taken in and the first or second round, and so the team is able to better connect with the candidate. On the brand side, again, what impact can this person have on the business, on the world, in this new world we're in? And on the growth side, what's the future of the role? What ownership is this person going to have now, or 6 months or 12 months from now? One question that's continually coming up is, what is the training like on this position? What success have you had? What metrics you can share? How are you training people? Again, coming up more and more. And it's important. People want to be onboarded in the best possible way. So I highly recommend thinking about that as you share more with the candidate. And then last but not least, the questions that you ask a candidate at the very end. Do you have a good understanding of what the role is in the day-to-day? Do you feel like you can do the role? Do you want to do it? If the offer looks good, when can you start? If you get answers of yes in all of these areas, it's a good chance you have an opportunity to present an offer that's going to be accepted at a high percentage. You have a lot of momentum there. Closing, we always recommend a deadline, even now, 3 to 7 days from the offer. If needed, invite them to team events like happy hours, bonus points if you can get their significant others to join, or even some of your significant others or kids to join. And of course, once you get a signed offer, prepare them for a counter offer. It's very normal. No one wants to lose talent in this market. Every single person now is looked at an investment more than ever. And so we're seeing some pretty big counter offers come up at this time. That's it from me, guys. Thank you.
Fantastic information, Natan. Thank you so much for sharing that. What I'd like to do now is move into the fireside chat. So I will go ahead and share my webcam if Chris can as well. Fantastic. Hey, gentlemen. Great. So Natan, again, super interesting information there. I think one of the themes that I really initially took away, so Codility has been hosting a series of kind of what we call these remote first, informative type of webinars, and have been solely concentrated on kind of the internal company side, right? So we hosted one a couple of weeks ago specifically around enterprises and how they're taking things remote and kind of best practices to learn from. But I think what a lot of us, forget about too is that there's another side of this, right? It's the candidate side, and really practicing those pieces of empathy, I think, are even more important now. And so I think some of the takeaways that I initially, kind of wrote down around your presentation was really thinking through and being flexible around, things like, hey, they might have kids and wives and other things going on in the personal lives in the background as well. And so I think practicing empathy throughout that process is going to be just of the utmost importance. So I want to start there, actually. I'd love to start, first with how are you guys doing? And over the last couple of weeks, what are you seeing kind of as the clear differentiators in terms of the candidate experience? I know, Natan, you gave us a broad range of topics and exposure around that, but maybe I'll turn this over to Chris and ask you, as a CTO right now, what are some learnings and some takeaways that you've taken away from the process around what's happened with COVID-19 over the last few weeks, and how that's impacted your ability to recruit top engineering talent?
Yeah, thanks for that, Scott. I think Natan hit on some really important points with empathy. Now more than ever, every single person is a huge investment in the success of their company. So we are doubling down on engaging our consultants and our team members such that they feel really connected to us as a part of a community, as a part of a company, as a part of like a tech organization that really looks after each other now more than ever. We just started to engage our teams, even in a digital way on Slack and with fun competitions and little rewards to keep them engaging with each other. We actually see this as a huge opportunity because everyone's at home and there's such high availability such that we can connect more and spend a few extra moments. You know, in terms of the recruiting side and candidate experience, if you stop and think about it, it's a golden opportunity where you don't have to contend with all those highly scheduled meeting rooms where you lose a minute here or there when somebody's leaving a room or somebody, you know, there's always some logistical issue. So you can easily sneak in a question or two more to really get to know the candidate more deeply on a professional level or even on a technical level.
That's fantastic. Natan, any other comments or points that you want to add there in terms of feedback?
Yeah, I mean, the last few weeks and month have been very interesting. A lot of companies have went on hiring freezes, but there are plenty of companies that are hiring right now. I think there is, as I mentioned, there's a lot more noise in the market. There's a lot more talent in the market, and I don't mean noise in a negative way, but it does mean sifting through a lot more candidates. And how do you find the right ways to, one, qualify those candidates, two, engage those candidates, and three, close those candidates? And so we're seeing some very interesting ways companies are doing this, how we've adapted. I'm happy to go into that, and obviously I mentioned that in the presentation, but just because people are on the market doesn't mean that you're going to get them to sign the agreement and start at your company.
Absolutely. I'd like to kind of dig into this a little bit deeper. The other thing that I think I took from the presentation, Natan, was, you know, obviously, you know, the entire candidate experience is important, right? And then sourcing all the way through to offer. But I think you have a really interesting point around the post-candidate experience too, right? And so in particular, I would have to think that folks more than ever are concerned about what does onboarding really look like. You know, I know that we've been in a remote world for a while, even prior to COVID-19. But not now, to where everything out there is positioned remotely. So I'm curious to hear from your guys' perspectives, and then also what you've heard back from candidates. You know, what are some of the concerns around the onboarding experience? And we'd love to see if you guys have anything to share around that as well. Maybe we'll,
first and foremost,
we'll start.
Access to hardware is an issue. There are key people that can't even get into buildings to get the laptops to provision them. So we've seen a lot of flexibility out of some of our clients that allow people to use their own hardware, which we're like, okay, it's interesting. That would never have happened a few months ago. So just a lot of patience and double checking each step of the process. It's easy to be so busy in these times and to miss a step, but that's a huge impact for somebody who really wants to get to work and doesn't have the most smooth onboarding experience. So just like we need to double down on empathy and build a strong community with each of our employees, that starts even before they onboard with a very welcoming messaging and getting a chance to get to know them on a deeper level and setting them up for success from the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, I'll add to that as Chris, one of his last points in terms of getting to know people, trying to get as many people to engage with that person, not to the point to overwhelm them, but just to welcome them and be a part of the training. I've seen that as a win, that we like to get, as many people as possible that know the information involved in the training process, even if it's just for 30 minutes or 1 hour. That shows that it's not just one or two nice people in the organization or smart people. We actually have a lot of people. I think showing wins in training, as a lot of candidates ask right now, well, have you ever done remote training before? And the answer is almost always no, we haven't. So be honest, but at the same time, what tools are you using? I think that's really important to show. What wins are you having? And as Chris said, communication is so key. So having that patience and flexibility to ask the same questions over and over again is not a knock on that person or knock on the trainer. It's just like, we need to get this right, and let's over communicate here. And I would emphasize that again in the process. We do a lot of over communicating. That's the style that we have, if that's what you portray. If you present a lot more autonomy, maybe that's not the case, but at least warn the candidate beforehand. Hey, we're going to give you this. This is the expectations. This is how it's going to go. Or we're going to have a lot of people help you through this training, and yada yada.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's really important, because again, kind of going back to some of our last webinars, a lot of folks, we're concentrated on kind of the here and now, and in particular, getting the candidate through that process. But also too, there's going to be that questions like, well, we haven't done this before, so we're kind of reinventing the wheel to some regard on how to onboard you. And I think that that's really well said by both of you. It's just, complete openness, honest, and transparency around that. But then also too, I think you mentioned it, Natan, the vulnerability, right? I think everyone, is in this for the first time, and so I think kind of just expressing that with, again, that empathy and that transparency is going to go a really long way. Great. So the other thing that I wanted to kind of maybe dig into as well was the virtual culture too, right? And so it's one thing, I think on the recruitment side, hey, in most typical old-fashioned interview process, maybe you started out doing a couple, online virtual type of interviews, but usually as you got progressively further along with the candidates, there's always that in-person, and there's really the time to shine as an organization to recruit them on board, but also for the candidate to evaluate as well. So I'm curious to what are we hearing from candidates in terms of about the virtual culture, and what are questions that are being asked right now, and how you recreate that? I know you'd mentioned like, hey, inviting folks to Zoom happy hours and being really well connected throughout all of that. But what are some of the things that maybe the candidates are really asking to really kind of vet a company in this particular environment and situation?
Yeah, I can jump into that. I think that before just answering the question, I love the idea of getting people, again, involved in the interview process from a Zoom perspective, so that people can talk and see the culture and see what each person is like. And so the more that you can do that in the process, and obviously, have the right people involved, the more people are going to buy in or buy out, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think, something that candidates are very curious about is what is the transition plan of the company right now, in terms of physical space, getting back into the office, but also, is the company shifting any of their priorities right now? And so that's coming up a lot. And then what, bringing that down and understanding that a little bit more, people are selfish, and so they want to know, how does that affect them? Like, be specific, be transparent. If you're shifting your business model, or if the team is going to be working on something different, I wouldn't necessarily talk, as much about what the team has been doing, unless you're going to talk about wins. I would talk about what the team is going to be doing, why they're doing it, and why that's important, and see if you can try to get that candidate to buy into that sort of new step that the team is up to.
I'd like to add to that. I think Natan brings up a good point in terms of leading from the front and showing the way forward. I think people need and respect strong leadership right now, and brings them along to where the company is going. So you could expect to get a lot of questions on the strategy and the tactics and some of the operational changes that you need to make, even for basic subtle things like you normally would expect in an office. How is that handled, in terms of expenses remotely?
Sure. I'm also curious too, are we hearing, organizations, prior to what's going on with COVID-19 over the last couple of weeks ago, there were some organizations that, were really flexible about, their remote capabilities and process and allowing candidates. And then there were some organizations that were less adaptable to that. I'm curious how maybe in your guys' perspectives, maybe on the companies, maybe this is more on the company side, but thinking through, are candidates asking questions like, hey, we're looking to be temporarily, from the organization side, we're looking to be temporarily remote right now, and then we're looking to transition back into the office. I'm curious to see, like, are there any questions that the candidates are having, how organizations are maybe who were less likely to be more adaptable to having folks be remote? Is there any changes around their flexibility now? I guess what I'm saying. So.
Yeah, I think Scott, in the immediate term, everyone's super flexible, and a lot of people don't have the answers for how long they will be, under quarantine or whatnot, and it seems to be, at least in the States, evolving on a state-by-state basis. So I do think people are super curious about it. I just don't know that leaders have all the answers. Like, will this remote culture really stick? And then there's definitely a ton of leaders, pioneers out there that have been remote first from the beginning. And I think being agile in this world today and adaptable towards change, I think remote cultures will likely outperform people that are really stuck with physical locations, just in mindset and just keeping their expenses low, and
Sure.
maybe appealing to some of the software engineers who maybe a little bit more introverted and like to work at home and save time on commute. I think there's a huge conversation to be had about productivity now, in terms of people are putting in extra hours and they may be more productive in terms of output. Is the work-life balance there? And how do we keep, if companies like this output, how do we keep up that pace of innovation and results, but at the same time, put back some of the normalcy that we had before in terms of being able to go out and eat in restaurants and, do more social activities outdoors with your colleagues. So from my perspective, I think there's a ton of curiosity, but the answers aren't necessarily clear where this goes long term.
Yeah, I think, just to add to that, I think that some companies that at first were, very anti-remote are coming around and seeing, well, one, they don't have a choice right now. If they want to hire or keep their employees, it needs to be remote. But two, it's going to be very interesting to see, because I think it's going to be a little bit for a lot of companies to get back into the office. And so engineers that haven't had any remote experience right now are gaining that remote experience and building their case to say, hey, what if I don't want to go back to the office? Is my job still available? I've done great work for the last 3 or 6 months, however long it is. Hopefully it's not that long, but I imagine that a number of people are going to want to move out of urban cities, be closer to family or relatives or friends. And I think that's going to come up more and more. A lot of companies are asking, have you had a remote experience before? And so that is, hopefully helping them qualify people in. But at the same time, a lot more people are going to say yes to that when we're through this process or later in this process. So we're seeing companies change their mindset. We don't know what's going to happen, but I think that remote first companies they're having their day right now. That's for sure.
Absolutely. Great. So while we've been speaking, I've noticed a couple questions from the audience come in, and I'd love to pose a few of these. So the first question is, what training tools are you using for new developers right now? So
yeah, I could take that one. Yeah, I love this question. Yeah, I love this question. And first of all, I'm completely inspired by Pluralsight. They gave away a free month of April. So I was like, wow, that's amazing. And it's not even an expensive offering. And it's got a guy like me now pitching them, because I was like a kid at Christmas, like, oh my God, I could learn more about machine learning. I can learn more about Golang. I could learn more about this and that. Like, And I'm pretty focused to actually put together a whole plan for myself. But for what we're doing at InRhythm, and being inspired by Pluralsight, we actually started to invent our own training tools. And we have our team super fired up right now. For example, going into javascript.info and reverse engineering like core JavaScript concepts and writing assessments in even Google Forms to sort of get people up to, when you interview somebody, you're trying to qualify them for a position, and you pick up a bunch of little bits of information, and the reality is not everyone can be expert in everything. So they come to you typically with what I call Swiss cheese knowledge. So we just invented, at least for web, a way to fill in the holes in the Swiss cheese by doing an assessment, even using free content like JavaScript info, building Google Forms assessment, and then following up with that, for example, in GitHub exercises. The whole approach, though, is absolutely not from, are they up to snuff, and is this really like a performance management thing? The whole approach is definitely from a learning and growth and an investment into people, such that not only do they feel welcomed, they feel comfortable that we could acknowledge what they don't know, and we can get them a coach to fill in those holes. So we're building our own tools.
Yeah, one thing that I mentioned, Chris, I think that's fantastic, is that the number one thing, outside of flexibility, number two is learning and development. And just because we're not next to each other doesn't mean that we can't learn. So I think that's fantastic that InRhythm is doing that. I would also just add sharing and having someone go over a company wiki. So what companies do on the culture side, obviously update that, if there's stuff that's for on-site, but more for remote, so that you can walk someone through and give them a good understanding of what the culture is like and how to do different things. It could be something very small to update a platform like a JustWorks or HR software that the candidate or person doesn't know. And I think it's very important, especially now, that they can't just walk over to someone's desk necessarily and say, hey, how do you do this? That can be very frustrating. So if you can take the time and walk them through on the culture side what's going on, and ask them if they have things that they would add or they've seen worked well in the past, that empowers people and obviously gives them the certainty that they're looking for.
Yeah, I think that speaks a lot to kind of a really great point around like kind of continuing education, and kind of breaks out that isolation, right? Like, hey, we have some continuing education programs and process that we can put in place to help make sure that you feel supported. And obviously you're not going to be sitting next to someone at a desk, to your point, Natan, but we've got kind of some things here and some tools and resources to really kind of support your efforts along the way. I think that's really important. Great. Really good question. I'd like to pose another one here. This one actually looks like it's specifically asked you, Chris. Chris, you mentioned that you have some games to keep the teams engaged. Could you share some of those with us?
Yes. I think the spirit of that question was like gamifying engagement and culture. It's not necessarily games per se. We looked at, in terms of engaging with our team as like building a community. And the first thing that came to mind was recognizing any gratitude to some friends and family of our employees that are on the front lines. So we whipped up a Google form, and we asked for entries with a write-up on their family member or friend who,
awesome.
Who's out there, putting their lives at risk for everybody, and getting a write-up on them, getting pictures with them if they're comfortable with share that, and then we can reach out and thank their loved one or their friend directly on behalf of our company. And even something small it could hit home. Next up, we thought about what do people like to do and what can't they do right now. And it was actually really funny to see people start to post pictures. It started with our CEO joking around like, where are you going in the month of April? And it was like, nowhere, because nobody's going anywhere. But then it led into post pictures of places that you've traveled in the past, and the post with the most emojis in the channel, got a $50 seamless gift card. And then next up for this week, it was about what are you eating this week for lunch? And we've got some really interesting, lunch options, and it's actually terrible because you're looking at the stuff, you're like, man, I'm really hungry right now. So in terms of gamifying, you can take this further. You can do just about anything. You could play, a card game online with Zoom. There's lots of games that I played physically that I think could translate, if you just think about it for a moment, towards how would you leverage the video and the grid world of like looking at multiple players and whatnot. But I think engaging with people, whether it's just to engage or for reward and recognition, this is a very important creative endeavor. Whereas business people were always focused on like getting things done and delivering. I feel like we're often using a different side of our brain. This is about people. This is about their motivation. And there frankly are a lot of lonely people out there that used to get out and can't, and want a little bit more today. I think it doesn't really cost you much to make that, spend a little bit more time on a video, but not having it 100% being about work, just being about relating to one another and having some fun too.
We also, just to add in terms of a game that we like, or we're starting, is to do a show and tell. So we're choosing a few people each week to present to the company something that they have in their house that they want to share, and gives a little insight into who they are. And I think that's always powerful, people speaking about themselves and their memories, and it gives you an insight into people that you might not have had before and brings the team closer together.
Absolutely. And I think, as very well said, and I think that, again, going back to the empathy, humanizing it, when it's so hard to obviously have that human connection right now, I think that really goes a really long way. All right, so we're getting quite a bit of questions now. So we've got another question from the audience. It says, would work from home will be a new trend, as this can save lots of money to the employer? I think we started actually addressing that earlier, but maybe if we want to maybe expand on that again.
I'll jump in on that. I do think it's going to be a new trend. Well, first off, I don't think it is a new trend. It's been going on, but more and more are going to be adapting to this. I think this is a good opportunity for companies to see talent that isn't local and work with those types of people. There's still a trust factor. And I think in the past, people have only hired people remote if, one, they have really good remote experience, or two, they've worked with someone in the company. And now that more people are having remote first experience, and if they're getting their work done, there's no reason they need to be in that location or they need to go into the office every day. And so I do see this as something that more and more companies are going to adapt. Obviously, usually tech first companies are more liberal when it comes to this. But even law firms that we're speaking with are more and more open. And I think companies want to save money as well on the commercial real estate side. And so I think that in-person meetings are going to be really the only reason for a lot of companies that people come in.
Yeah, I see.
Anything else you want to add on there?
Yeah, I see an impact to corp to corp company meetings, like people having to have a really good reason to go see each other. I've been asking myself this question a lot recently in terms of how much will this remote culture really stick post pandemic, and I'm kind of on the fence with it. I see maybe somewhere in the middle, to be honest with you, because co-working was a big trend because it was driving down the cost of real estate for companies, but now the concept of packing people into small places is just not going to work. So it affects those economics, and there's a health safety concern there. So, but when Natan said about access to people they normally wouldn't have been speaking with or even working, like, would I hire a developer based out of Ohio right now? Sure. Like, that's an open option for us in terms of I would not have been thinking that way. Some of it is, it's going to be situational, but it's easy to say that the pendulum will completely shift towards remote. But I have to believe, though, people will get back to normal of socializing with others and having a more physical work culture than we have right now. I just don't know that it will permanently stick.
Yeah,
I'm on the fence.
Yeah, Chris, I'm not, just to clarify my point, I don't think we're all going to be like this forever. Some people really want to be back in the office. They want to have that sort of routine in their day. There are also going to be a lot of people, I think, that just don't feel comfortable being back in the office with so many people. And I think that that's going to be a challenge for employers. What do you say when, a really strong employee says, I don't feel comfortable going to the office, or people are coughing or sneezing, or the cleaning crew is not up to date? I think we're going to have to see some time go by before we obviously understand what that looks like. We don't have a crystal ball, but I think there's still a lot of people that don't feel comfortable.
Yeah. They don't feel comfortable with public transportation.
Exactly.
The list will go on and on in terms of, why am I putting myself at risk? There isn't a vaccine for this. So you're right. It will take some time to unpack all that.
Absolutely. So just a quick time check, really great questions. So as we're wrapping up here in the last 10 minutes or so, I encourage you, audience, if you have any more questions that you'd like to pose to our panelists, please try to do that now. In the meantime, I'd like to quickly shift. So we talked around kind of end of funnel of the process and onboarding, and what what that really means to the candidate and what they're looking for. I'd like to shift gears a little bit and go to the top of the funnel. So what are you guys seeing in terms of sourcing and attracting side of the house, right? So both from the organization side, from the candidate side, how they're approaching looking at opportunities right now. How do you build kind of that interest with the candidates for those positions, and how do you make the company more attractive during these times? Start with Natan on this one.
Sure. Yeah, I had a few slides on that, and just to expand, people want to know what they are going to be doing in this sort of environment right now, and what impact that's going to have on the greater part of things. I can't speak for everyone. I'm making a generalization here, but giving people answers in terms of what technology they're using if they're an engineer, what the business is doing from a branding perspective, and how they're making an impact on that branding side. There's obviously some people that are just looking for a job and they need money, and that's okay. I think the really top talent, we haven't seen those people, unless they're in like retail or travel, be laid off. And so if they're going to make a move, it's probably for a really good reason, probably outside of the money. Maybe that's more impact in their own role. Oftentimes what we're seeing is that there's a new world out there. What they're working on right now doesn't pertain to that. And so their next opportunity is going to have a lot more scale, if I can use like an engineering word there.
I could add on to that. Next opportunity having more scale means more so now than ever aligning the position towards their career aspirations and goals. You're right that some people may just be looking for jobs, but those that would be interested in making a significant career change right now, I think you got to have a solid fit in terms of what they're about. And it always fascinates me to get to know people more deeply professionally and align their value system and their passion and frankly years of hard work and knowledge and training and learnings towards the mission or the position or how they can make an impact in the world. I mean, I see that trend in general. People just want more meaning in their work, but now more so than ever, especially, the stakes are so high in terms of, making an impact, that the alignment just absolutely needs to be there. And, in terms of the top of funnel, how do you do that? How do you do that at scale? How do you find that fit with, they have the right technical skills, they have the right system design skills. Oh yeah, oh by the way, they're actually going to be motivated to do this job because it's for the greater good, or actually it's for their mission. Like, what is their personal brand, and how does that align to the brand and mission of the company that we're gonna place them at?
To expand on that, one question that I find to be very interesting, and we look at things like our technology helps us, but there's 3 layers of data for a potential candidate. There is what's on their public profile, which is what everyone has access to. There's what's on their resume, which generally expands on the public profile and what they've built and what they've done and where they've done that. And then the last is kind of that first question and answer time, and that could be over email, that can be an application. Generally it's over a phone call to really understand, okay, why are you doing these things? What are you looking for? What has been your favorite part in the past of the work that you've done? What have you been missing? And so with all of that data together, for us, it helps us identify the right position for the person, and we have our engineering team help there. But there's a lot of volume right now, and you kind of really need to get under that first layer, the first 2 layers to get that answer, especially because, as Chris said it, each hire is more of an investment than ever before.
Natan, you'd said over a phone call. I'm just curious, are people really still doing phone calls? Because I feel like before, if I try to get somebody on a video, there'd be sometimes reluctance because they got to take a call in the corner of their office somewhere. But I've been 100% video. Is that the case as well for you guys?
I think we highly recommend video for all of the conversations in an interview. But still, some companies are doing a phone call for the first step. And that could be like a 20-minute conversation, just asking questions, and people, are not necessarily filling up for the video that day or whatnot. If it was up to me, I would say every single conversation should be a video conversation. But again, and I can share the deck afterwards, a lot of those questions that we ask candidates on that first conversation are understanding flexibility and work authorization, financial stuff like that.
Fantastic. Great. So just do a quick time check here. We're coming near the end with about 5 minutes left. I think this will be the last question before we let everyone go. So again, kind of you'd mentioned, Natan, kind of going back to the sourcing, like the volume. So I actually want to quickly dive into that volume and kind of understand specifically, how are you guys really kind of changing up how you vet candidates, right? So kind of the whole volume, supply and demand, and how organizations and folks are really looking at candidates under kind of a different microscope because of what's happened over the last couple of weeks. Chris, maybe I'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, so quality and the talent of the candidates that we're looking at now more so than ever is critical. There is increased volume of people out there that are looking for work, but we also need to maintain a pretty high bar. So in terms, what are we changing up? We're definitely going to be looking at more automation. We do a lot of manual coder pads these days and have to ask candidates to share their screen. And I feel like it's actually super engaging to get to know how people think, and it's I personally enjoy doing them, but it may not be the most effective and efficient thing for scale, because if you had a test that somebody could do that's not overbearing, that's to Natan's point about transparent in the amount of time, that's definitely an easy way to blow it with a candidate if you give them too much work up front. But I definitely need to automate because the volume is significant, and while it's super fun to have a collaborative coding session with somebody, I think a lot of that can be automated with tools.
Yeah, I think automation is huge. I'm excited about what Codility has, and companies that are helping other companies accelerate their process and make it more efficient. I think that one question that we've seen come up more and more is, what has this person built that has been similar to what we are building? And that's always been the case, but I think a lot of industry data is very important to see where's the candidate come from, what have they worked on, and then if you get a resume, what have they specifically built, what was their part of that project? And that should give a little bit more insight into, can this person build what we're looking for?
Absolutely. Great. Well, I want to, with just about 2 minutes or so remaining here, I want to thank you both for your time today. Appreciate you guys making the time and providing these insights. I hope the audience felt the same. I felt like this, there was a lot of great information here, great content, and just want to thank you both, extend that to you. Please stay, or you know, in the spirit of kind of empathy, you know, please stay safe to you guys. And really, again, I appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Scott. It's been awesome.
It's been awesome,
All
Scott.
right.
Thanks for having us.
Really appreciate it.
Please
Thank
remember
you.
to wash
Take
your
care.
hands, everybody. See you.
Absolutely.
Have a good one.